This episode of The Young Turks is brought to you by GoDaddy.com. If you go to theyoungturks.com/GoDaddy, you get the best promo codes in the world.
Inside Job wins the Oscar for Best Documentary. It was seriously the most powerful film I saw this year. If you haven't seen it, you should check it out, although I suspect a good proportion of Young Turks watchers have seen the film. Charles Ferguson was the director. He wins the Oscar for Best Documentary, and he gets up and he makes that very powerful speech about how nobody associated with the financial crisis on Wall Street is in jail and how outrageous that is. New Chief of Staff William Daley was on Meet the Press this weekend with David Gregory, talking about a number of things that Obama is facing, and David Gregory did ask him about whether anyone associated with the financial crisis should be in prison. Daley, who came from a Wall Street career, gave an incredibly lame answer. And here is the first part of that answer in the Q&A with David Gregory on Meet the Press.
As you know, financial reform was much debated here in Washington, and when you were J.P. Morgan Chase was a significant concern in Wall Street and the financial community. And so this caught our attention during the Oscars. The director, Charles Ferguson, of Inside Job, which was the documentary about the financial collapse, in accepting his Oscar, said the following.
Forgive me, I must start by pointing out that 3 years after a horrific financial crisis caused by massive fraud, not a single financial executive has gone to jail, and that's wrong.
Does the president agree that that's wrong?
I think no one has been more out front on the need for financial reform. Obviously, the justice system will take its place, and the politicians should not engage in trying to say who should be prosecuted or who should not. That's not a responsible thing to do.
Am I an idiot, or have not presidents in the past 235 years of this country said things such as, the perpetrators of this injustice will be brought to justice. The perpetrators of this crime will be brought to justice. Is that somehow overstepping presidential bounds? I got that a president shouldn't say, go after this guy and make sure we prosecute this guy. But a president can lead the way and tell his attorney general, hey, this is a serious matter and I want it investigated. And you can do that without crossing over into the crazy politicizing Bush administration grounds of assigning or firing prosecutors, firing U.S. attorneys who didn't adhere to your political wishes. These aren't political situations. These are people who broke the law. And you can come in and say, it's a priority that we're going to prosecute financial crimes. And then turn your attorney general loose and say, your mandate is to prosecute financial crimes, now I'm out of it. That's leadership. Of course you can do that. Every politician doesn't say, hey, I'm turning a blind eye to every crime. I have no idea what's going on. That's crazy talk and a giant cop-out. That's not an answer. It's not a politician's place to say whether a crime's been committed. Hey, that guy got shot in the head. I don't know. It's not my place to say whether that should be investigated. You're the President of the United States. Now we got people talking about whether it's appropriate or not, about whether you should comment on Wisconsin, about whether you should comment on whether you should take a stand against Libya, whether you should take a stand about whether the biggest financial fraud in the history of the United States, about whether you should take a stand about whether people should be prosecuted for it. Of course you should. Not specifically a certain person, but whether the Attorney General should take an active role, whether your Justice Department should take an active role in determining whether there were crimes committed? Of course you should. What else are you supposed to do? You don't tell your Attorney General to prosecute only your political opponents. That's a crime. That's an abuse of power. But telling your Justice Department to investigate whether the greatest financial fraud in the country should be investigated and whether there were crimes committed, man, that's your frickin' job. It's a cop-out answer and a terrible answer, and you could tell by the way William Daley stumbled over it that he wasn't even comfortable answering the question, and a guy who came from J.P. Morgan Chase, which doesn't have its hands clean in this process in any way, shape, or form, couldn't have been a worse guy to answer the question, which made it a great question to ask. Of course, it would have been a great question to put to make Bill Daley sweat for 8 minutes on, but that didn't happen. I got it. That's not really how this process worked. That's not how Meet the Press works. Man, it would be great to just make him uncomfortable for 8 minutes. And I don't just mean for the sake of making him uncomfortable. I just mean we've let this process go. We don't talk about it anymore, and it would be wonderful if for a long period of time these guys had to explain themselves. The Obama administration didn't do it. I got that. But they let it go. And now they've administered a financial reform bill which didn't fix the problem. Didn't go nearly far enough to fix the problem. It's debatable about how far it went, but it didn't go far enough. And the notion that he's as outraged as anybody by what happened and he did all he could, man, I don't buy it, and I don't think anybody else following the situation buys it. Charles Ferguson, the director of Inside Job, didn't buy it, and he talked to people incredibly close to the situation, and not radicals, man. If you haven't seen Inside Job, these are guys in Wall Street with suits and ties whose life has been spent in the financial sector making a lot of money. And their reaction to Chris Dodd's financial reform bill was, come on. After that movie, when I saw it at the Telluride Film Festival, no movie in my lifetime has caused an audience to get more outraged. Todd McCarthy from Variety, the critic, used to be for 30 years, more than 30 years, was a critic for Variety. He led the conversation with Charles Ferguson afterwards. And the crowd, after seeing that movie, they were furious at Todd McCarthy and at Charles Ferguson. Todd McCarthy was leading the conversation. Charles Ferguson made the movie, and they were incredibly angry at him. They were like wanted to choke him because they had nobody else to choke. Because their fury at what had been done to this country by those villains on Wall Street and by a series of administrations that let it happen, and I'm counting Bill Clinton, no question about it, by the people who had let this happen, by the way, nobody worse than George W. Bush, though, but by a series of administrations, starting with Ronald Reagan and running right up through the Bush administration and a little bit Obama, because how do you go let Larry Summers have a major job? But how that had happened, they wanted to strangle Charles Ferguson. He's the guy who made the movie. They were just that angry. So after the film, finally, all these people gathered around Charles Ferguson asking him questions. Eventually, I asked him a question. And among the two questions I asked him was, hey, those guys you talked to, your friends, the guys who you became acquainted with in making this film, do they think the Chris Dodd's bill, the financial reform bill that had yet to pass, do they think it'll make a difference? And he shook his head and he just said, no, absolutely not. Not a serious difference. Tiny at best. Window dressing. So Bill Daley's response about cracking down that it's a real effort and that, it makes Wall Street shake. We fought it on Wall Street. People like JP Morgan Chase didn't like it. Horse crap. By the way, if they really didn't like it, it wouldn't have passed. Here's the rest of Bill Daley's answer, where he goes back and he brings the Civil War into it. The Civil War Bill Daley ends up talking about.
But the president felt very strongly, and that's why he fought so hard for financial regulatory reform, that the system has got to change. Most of the laws that the financial sector worked under were enacted closer to the Civil War than to this century. And he fought. It was tough, to be honest with you. I was in an industry that at the time, as you mentioned, that fought many of it, not all of it, probably 80–85% of it the industry wanted. They wanted to stop too big to fail and a number of other things. But it was controversial, difficult, but he hung in there and he got what he wanted.
Come on. We wanted a lot of it. We fought some of it. You shouldn't have wanted any of it. It should have been a fight, an actual fight. But you guys got what you wanted. And you're still high-fiving each other. And we all know it. And you should have been made to sweat more. It's a system. It's not David Gregory's fault. It's a system where you need to be able to sweat more, and we need to be able to see guys like you sweat.
Cenk, if you want to buy a domain name, you want to know the best website to go to?
I already know it. GoDaddy.com.
First of all, they have 24/7 customer service.
If you want to download GoDaddy's free iPhone, Android, or BlackBerry app, boom, on your phone instantly. And if you go to theyoungturks.com/GoDaddy, you get all of our promo codes, like TYT1 gets you 10% off from all your orders.
TYT3 gets you a .com domain for only $7.99.
You can't beat that.